Welcome back to this plenary session. I'm Alicia Main. I'm the Van Dusen Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Simon Fraser University and a co-chair of this conference. And I've been delighted with the interesting and thought-provoking presentations we've heard so far today in the track, certainly in the opening keynote with Scott Stern, but also in the tracks on innovation policy, firm entrepreneurial strategy, and innovation intermediaries. Thank you in particular to the presenters, the discussants, and the session chairs, as well as to our facilitators from the Creative Coffee session. We look forward to compiling and considering ideas put forward so far today. In this session, we focus on capabilities which can enable research-based innovation from universities. We welcome your Q&A. Please put them into the chat as you think about them going on or towards the end of the session. And to start us off, Professor Einar Rasmussen, a leading scholar in academic entrepreneurship and innovation policy, will speak about innovation capabilities for universities. Einar, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alicia, for the introduction. I'm Professor Einar Rasmussen, and I'm honored to be invited to speak to you at this very interesting event. So it's a pity we cannot meet face to face, but it's great to be involved here. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about how universities can enable research-based innovation. And give a brief introduction to that topic. So let's see. So I will first start with a couple of, let's say, contextual factors. We have already heard a little bit about this from Scott Stern and from others in the previous sessions. So science commercialization, as we know, is a quite challenging topic and a quite challenging process. It's a long and complex process. It usually takes many years from the basic research is started until it's applied in a product or service or so forth. And also it happens across academia and business, which have very different goals and very different impacts. So let's have a brief look at these differences. So when working with science commercialization, we need to, let's say, decouple the knowledge from the academic setting and the academic logic, which is non-profit. Academics are seeking novelty and engaging in scientific debates, are fairly autonomous in their work. And dissemination is valued if you figure out something novel you want to spread the word. And integrate it into a commercial logic and commercial setting, which is for profit, where the important thing is to use the knowledge for something useful, and the organizational structures are different, and confidentiality is more valued. So there are some tensions going across these two different contexts. And also the literature in this area is often looking at, let's say, different pathways of knowledge transfer from academia to the business. So there is some of these that are formal, related to intellectual property and licensing and patenting and formal collaborative research and so on. And there is a lot of informal interaction taking place between academics and businesses in publications, in conference, and in networking, and being located in proximity to each other, and training and so forth. So all of these, let's say, we can call them pathways of knowledge transfer, are important and contribute to the process of science commercialization. But if you look at the research in this area, we see that these pathways are very much linked together and complementary. So so many processes it may start with a collaborative research. Maybe there is some exchange of staff between the business and and the university, and then there is some idea that result in a spin-off company, and maybe the spin-off company later is acquired by an industrial partner. So there is a lot of interaction going on. We also see that it's complementary. So universities that are good in university industry collaboration is also good in creating spin-offs and so forth. And also we see that this is a fairly stable situation, that some universities perform very well in commercialization of science. We had the example from MIT in the first keynote, and other known examples, and it's very difficult to do something quick to become better in this area. And research also show that if you are looking for the factors behind, it's much easier to find that individual level factors, so the experience of the scientist and so on, are more important, and group level factors are more important than department level factors, and these are more important than university level factors. So so when you come to a higher level of aggregation, it's more difficult to find out how to kind of improve on these capabilities of commercialization. So the big question then is, can we identify capabilities in universities that facilitate the commercialization process? And then I think we need to look into I will look into the specific context of university spin-off ventures, where I've been involved in several studies. And I think we need to ask the questions, let's say, if the universities are going to be good at creating spin-offs, what do these spin-off companies need in order to grow and develop? And what can the university offer them in order to help them develop? Or we should also be aware what the university cannot offer. And I will, and I've been publishing with colleagues on this, and we propose that there are 3 competencies that are important for spin-offs to develop, especially in the earlier stage when they may emerge from the university. So the first of these competencies is the competence to develop a good entrepreneurial opportunity. In that sense, it's to have a good context to develop that competency is if you have industry and user connections that are integrated in the research. It increases the likelihood of developing these opportunities. If the research departments are actively engaged in a search for possible applications of the technology, if you have industry experience in the founding team of the spin-off, can be important to adapt the technology to a commercial setting, and industry interactions and interaction with users, but also to maintain contact with the scientific community can be very valuable for this spin-off in order to develop a good commercial opportunity. And then the second competency that are important is what we label the championing competency, that any new venture need kind of someone providing the spirit and the championing behind it. For university spin-offs, this is typically a team effort. You need motivated and entrepreneurial scientists that are involved. They need support from colleagues and structures within the university supporting them in this effort. And also need help to provide what we can call this hybrid role, because they are going to be both academics and business people at the same time. And that's a very challenging effort. So any structures and mechanisms that can help them maintain this hybrid role is important. And then actually over time to add on new people, new champions, new team members from outside the university. And the third final competency is, let's say, the ability to acquire resources to the new venture. So within the university can offer physical resources and also research time to help new ventures. if they have colleagues that are experienced in commercialization activities and have networks, that can be important. And the university can develop networks with industry partners and also with investors that can help fund these ventures. And of course, have infrastructure in place, such as TTOs helping or incubators and so on. But also, it's very important that the university helps the venture getting access to resources from external actors. So they can get team members that have industry and have entrepreneurial experience on board. They get access to government grants, soft funding, and business angels and venture capital. And also very important is the access to industry partners and their knowledge and access to customers. So all of this are important for the spin-offs to develop and grow. And then the question is, how can the university develop such capabilities, or should the university care to do so? We also have 3 propositions of, let's say, capabilities that the universities could have to help the spin-offs. And this may be particularly important for the universities that are not so experienced and not high performing in this area. The universities that are high performing probably has these things in place. But if you do not have these things in place, I think it's important for the university to have the capability of opening this new path of action, what we can call commercialization, if you're not experienced in that, and need to signal that this is an important activity within the university. It's a legitimate activity within the university, and it probably particularly applies to the middle manager level. It's easier for the top level and at the scientist level to be supportive, but actually to prioritize this at all levels within the university. And the second capability a university should think of developing is to, what we talk about, this balance between the academic and the commercial interest, having clear policies on how to deal with this, giving active management support to the academics that are involved in commercialization activities, and set in place the structures like technology transfer offices and incubators and so on that can help maintain this balance between the academic and commercial work. And finally, what you talked about, integrating resources. So actually having good networks, establishing networks with industry, with investors, and also with public funding sources and others to do this is important. And just a final slide is actually, I think, for, let's say, the future thinking in this area, and what is important now is for science commercialization to improve. So let's see, that we need to think about, let's say, this goal alignment, I call it. One example is, for instance, the sustainability goals that you probably are familiar with, that if you have universities that are interested in achieving or contributing to these goals, they can actually see science commercialization as a way to create impact from their research. And in that way, that can be more easy to actually prioritize resources to this activity. So actually figuring out what goals the university and the academic community has in common with the business community in this area. And the other is this notion of ecosystems, that it takes a lot of different actors and factors to grow these ventures. And also, as Scott Stern was talking about in his keynote, this is highly important to see all these connections and different pathways together. So with that, I thank you for your attention. This is some of the research that's behind this presentation, but now I will give the word to Alicia.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Einar, for that wonderful presentation. We'll have a chance for questions on both presentations, more questions on both presentations at the end. But for now, we're going to move from the level of universities and what capabilities they can develop and improve to better enhance the movement of breakthrough invention to impactful innovation, to the level of the scientist. And, Einar spoke about scientists and the hybrid role that they're called upon to play to facilitate science commercialization. And that's what we're going to focus on in this presentation today. And I want to acknowledge the papers that I'm drawing on and the work of my co-authors on one paper that we just have in press right now, that is open access and is linked through the agenda. All three of my co-authors are participating today. Professor John Thomas from University of Fraser Valley, Dr. Martin Bleemill coming to us from UTS Australia and presenting this morning, I understand, from his car because of his young kids indoors, and Dr. Cynthia Shipham-Brett, who's with the National NRC Canada and is an ITA there. So the other paper that I'm drawing on in this talk, there are two papers. Our papers, Innovation Management and Science Entrepreneurship papers written in Nature Materials with venture capitalist Dr. Purnash Sigopal, and a paper about timing in better endowing science-based ventures with Professor John Thomas. So we heard in the keynote this morning with Professor Scott Stern about Cyclotron Road and Activate and about high quality entrepreneurial ventures and seeing more of those around universities. And I was in track B this morning, here in Vancouver. And Professor Aaron Scott spoke about exploratory S-curves versus exploitation, and scientists being able to jump and having the choice about whether they jump onto a new S-curve in launching their spin-off, and that early stage decision making. And we're missing an important lever when we look at our innovation ecosystems if we don't consider the scientists themselves. If we're not nurturing their entrepreneurial mindset and capabilities in order to allow some of these breakthrough inventions happening in their labs to create new S-curves and to create new opportunities. And not all of these scientists, you might say, well, I know lots of scientists who are never going to actually start ventures. They actually hate business. Well, they don't have to follow that path. And if they do, they could follow it by being on the scientific advisory board and or by being on the board of directors, as long as they have a strong link through to the science, often through their graduate students. But there's also two other important paths that are often neglected. If we get entrepreneurial mindset to our HQPs, to our master's students, our PhD students, our postdocs, and our faculty members, we can increase the bridges between industry, incumbents in industry, and breakthrough inventions in research labs, because large firms are notoriously not good at commercializing radical innovation that is not reinforcing their current product lines and value proposition. So increasing those bridges with people who actually do understand what it takes to get it out of the research lab, both the science and the potential opportunity, and also for those scientists remaining in academia, that they have the capability to influence the impact of their inventions through early stage decision making. And the reason that I'm talking about this, why are scientists different than other individuals who can start entrepreneurial ventures? Well, universities are pretty well uniquely positioned these days. And we'll hear in the keynote tomorrow with Professor Ashish Arora about the decline of corporate research labs and what corporate research labs are actually developing and bringing into the world and initiating. Well, universities are the place that are initiating more breakthrough invention. And so things that can become radical innovation defined by Jim Utterback, who's here with us today, and others as being a vast improvement in a current performance attribute, or enabling an entirely new performance attribute, or a very large reduction in cost per unit, usually through process innovation. So these are the types of things that can seed new industries and that can create opportunities rather than fit into existing ones. But also universities are often the source of breakthrough new platform technology or general purpose technology, also called generic technology, that enable value creation across several different sectors of the economy. So the potential for value creation is enormous, but it is complex. This is a schematic that I drew up after about a decade of research and trying to explain the different challenges faced by science-based ventures. To the left, we have the tech ventures, the tech sector, which is often treated as a bit of a one-size-fits-all, maybe with the exception of biotech. But there is a category of firms, biotech included, that actually fit into the language that Gary Pisano at Harvard Business School has written about science-based ventures. And what's distinctive about them is the time from invention to actual implementation in the market, so to innovation, is much longer. There's elevated uncertainty, both technology and market. And during that period of elevated uncertainty, large capital bets have to be made, maybe in clinical trials, in research, in the biomedical field, maybe in going to production equipment, to pilot equipment, and then full-scale production without knowing if what worked in the lab is going to scale at a viable cost. And so in the Nature Materials paper I referenced earlier, we looked at these different sectors and we looked at trying to be able to broadly characterize the different types of technology uncertainty, market uncertainty, and that red circle of the commercialization costs that have to be incurred while uncertainty is high, and the overall time. And so it is a very different challenge. And for investors, for seed investors, for venture capitalist investors, the IT sector is a lot easier bet to make. However, with science-based ventures, with the right set of capabilities, one can achieve superior returns in this sector. But even more importantly, that's where the major challenges facing us, the global challenges, exist here. So, we think about climate change and what's going to get us out of that crisis. It's going to be a mixture of innovation policy, new innovations, and our regulatory policy. And so absolutely there's a policy and regulatory component, but 11,000 scientists around the world have agreed that without breakthrough invention, we're not going to get out of that. That's going to happen here. With COVID-19, clearly, the vaccine that we're all hoping for so that we can be here together is going to come out of this space. And so it's very, very important, and universities have a strong role to play. Again, the literature, if you're not familiar with Gary Pisano's work on this, a book and a very good paper in 2010, Industrial Corporate Change, talking about the challenge of managing and rewarding long-term risk, I recommend it to you. But science-based ventures are ones that are both advancing science and trying to capture financial returns at the same time. So what are we doing right now to prepare our scientists, this very strong resource, to be able to have these skill sets, to launch these sort of ventures in challenging spaces and bring their breakthrough inventions to market? Well, in 2011, the US National Science Foundation started the I-Corps program, which was a good step in the right direction, but it took existing tools, which were the lean startup technique, and used that to help guide the early stage development of capabilities with scientists. And it's all very well and good, but it is about customer discovery, and it's a step too late for many for really taking advantage of opportunity creation. Because the lean startup principles, while they're important, are not sufficient to help this process happen, particularly the exploratory process and those exploratory S-curves that Dr. Scott was referring to. Lean startup is not good for managing high technology uncertainty. It's geared towards market uncertainty. And scientists need more tools overall for managing under commercial uncertainty and scale up uncertainty. They need to be able to think about techniques like what can a strategic patent and the strategic protection of IP actually open up for them, and how is it like a real option? They need to be able to think about what are the key uncertainties that certain experiments can reduce, and managerial actions can test. They need to be thinking early on, even at the project formulation stage, about matching their platform technologies to potential market applications and what that means in terms of the experiments they're defining and the technological attributes they're trying to achieve. And certainly understanding how this translates to how they have to interact with their technology licensing office and early stage investors. And again, I want to stress that this is not opportunity recognition skills we're talking about here. They're important, but in particularly opportunity creation, as really universities have a unique role and scientists within universities have a unique potential to contribute to. And traditional accelerators are very good at squashing these, at saying, that's technology push, there'll never be a market for that. And yet this is how new industries are formed. With that sort of logic that used to be mitigated by places like Bell Labs and Xerox PARC and GE and DuPont, who could have a longer term exploratory research resourced over a longer period of time. This is something that we need to create an ecosystem around at universities, and places like MIT and Stanford in particular have done an exemplar job of developing the system around there. So speaking of MIT, in the first paper that I mentioned that is in press at the moment, we did a multi-year study looking at a star scientist entrepreneur who had over 30 ventures, science-based spin-offs over his lab over a 40-year career. Very, very prolific scholar, over 1,400 papers, the highest cited chemical engineer in history, had issued at the time of the study more than 360 US patents and many, many more around the world, had licensed these to hundreds of companies and had helped tens of millions of patients. And we wanted to look at he and his lab and his ecosystem, and including the technology licensing office, and see if we could match very carefully over time the papers that were produced and as the inventions were discovered, match them to the patents that protected those inventions, and then onwards to the ventures that were launched, and then look at all of the evidence of capabilities developed along those times, so grounded in time. And this is quite unique in that the majority of academic entrepreneurship literature starts with the founding of the firm. My colleague here today, Einar Rasmussen, is a great example of someone who does look, a researcher who carefully does look at the processes pre-formation, but it's unusual. And yet a lot of the decisions that affect the eventual path of the science-based venture happen there in the decade even before founding. So we looked carefully at the scientist entrepreneur and the lab members, and we were able to shed light on 4 entrepreneurial capabilities that were repeatedly practiced by this star scientist entrepreneur and his lab members, his collaborators, and the technology licensing office, as well as the entrepreneurial network of venture capitalists and experienced entrepreneurs that were developed. And so I'm going to speak briefly about these 4 capabilities: technology market matching, claiming and protecting the invention, attracting and mentoring the founding team, and the strategic timing of actually forming a venture. So, of course, these exist within an ecosystem of the university, of needs that are out in the world around us, and of, importantly, the University Technology Licensing Office. So to the first capability, technology market matching. Any technology, and when we're thinking about a platform technology or a generic technology, one that can have impact over several sectors, think about advanced materials as a classic example. It's going to have advantages and drawbacks and uncertainties. There's going to be attributes that can define it. It's going to be stronger, lighter, tougher. It's going to have a certain amount of efficiency. And these attributes can differ greatly in the way they're valued in different markets. And here we're showing automotive, aerospace, consumer electronics. So one thing is prioritizing the first market, as well as growth markets, backup markets, and then thinking early about what needs to be done in terms of experiments, in terms of IP protection, and also in terms of company formation in order to create and capture value from those various markets. Because ironically, spreading your attention on too many of those markets at once is going to deter investors, and it's going to prevent you from proving your capabilities in such a way that investors are likely to support you. In a related manner, another thing we observed from this Star Scientist entrepreneur was from one single platform technology, in this case, the controlled release of macromolecular drugs into the human body, 10 different ventures were formed with additional technologies, but that were formed around different markets. And this provides multiple chances for success. And if the IP, again, is strategically licensed out into these different fields of use, and maybe different geographies as well, it's a way to, again, give the university and the inventor and the venture more chances of success. So it's an important, very early stage capability. The next capability I'm just going to briefly talk on is the claiming and protecting the invention. And in this case, the Star Scientist entrepreneur focused on platform technologies, signaled their excitement around them with the LEAP papers, nice to be able to do, and filed very early stage, very unusually broad blocking patents. And this was important because it's a currency. Patents are a currency of any university spinoff venture, a science-based venture, in order to be able to attract investment and alliance partners and potentially eventual acquisition to the firm. And critically, your technology licensing office is a key partner in this adventure. So the capability goes from the scientist level and in their interactions, but also very much to Professor Rasmussen's university level capabilities. There's a strong interaction here because many of our technology licensing offices do not have the capability to file on high risk. They may not have the capabilities, they may not have the sophistication, they may not have the resources that an MIT TLO has. Also, you ask yourself if your technology licensing office is focused on large firms or if they pay a lot of attention to small firms, because it may be surprising that at MIT, the vast majority of their technologies are licensed to small firms, which they have found are the firms that are willing to go with technologies right out of the university lab when they're radical in nature. And also ask yourself if your technology licensing office is overly focused on short-term cost recovery or on licensing revenue. And this can be because of the realities of how they're resourced is often the case, but it's going to be detrimental to the process if that's the case. If you are lucky enough to have a well-endowed fund or innovation policy or technology licensing office or endowment that can allow you to do this as a way to make an impact on society, you're in a very lucky position. I'm going to save it for later. If we do have questions about it, I have ideas about what in Canada and in other jurisdictions, what we could do to facilitate this process in terms of innovation policy. But for now, I'll just say that if any way that a university's ability to file patents on high-risk research can be enhanced, that's going to help the process. And briefly, the last two capabilities, the entrepreneurial capabilities for scientists, are about being able to attract and mentor founding team members for their spin-off ventures. And so in terms of the Star Scientist entrepreneur themselves, they may not take on any role, operational role in the venture. In this case, the Star Scientist entrepreneur is a director and on the scientific advisor boards of his ventures. But very, very often, a grad student or a postdoc alumni from his lab is the CSO and involved in various scientific leadership roles within the spinoff. And whereas the CEO and other business roles are usually through connections that have been nurtured over time with venture capitalists and with through them serial entrepreneurs. In certain cases, the star scientist entrepreneur actually recommended to someone who wanted to lead ventures, to come in and be part of the MIT community and eventually take on a role here. So sometimes he took a direct role in the business side or nurturing the business side as well. The very last capability of strategic timing, I just want to say that counterintuitively, founding as soon as possible can actually be detrimental to a science-based venture success. In many cases, we actually would like to see, or it would be more advantageous to that venture to wait in stealth mode to use the resources of the university and any kind of incubator facilities, core facilities that they have in order to de-risk the technology and wait until they're on a timeline that fits with venture capitalists or other investors before they found the firm. And sometimes that conflicts with innovation policy that needs a venture to be formed in order to access different government grants. So if we can do something on these capabilities, if we can nurture them in our scientists, PhD students, postdocs, faculty members, we will be pulling another lever that will help us be able to create impactful innovation from the wonderful science going on in our universities around the world. And remember, this is not just for new ventures that these scientists are going to be then developing. It's also for people that are going into industry, for scientists going into industry, being able to be a bridge back to university labs and breakthrough invention. Or if they're staying in academia, being able to be better resourced with translational research grants and to feel that they can make more of the impact that most scientists would like to make with the breakthrough inventions that they're developing. With that, I'd like to open up the floor to questions, both to Professor Rasmussen and myself. Ben, I'd ask you maybe if you could start us off with something that's been coming in from the chat box.
Sure, thank you very much, Alicia. Unfortunately, I did ask a question while you were preparing, but we weren't live. So I will ask this question again to Professor Rasmussen, if you don't mind. It does come from RRS is the initials here. And the question that this person posed is basically, what was meant by autonomy in academic logic and hierarchical in commercial logic?
Yeah, so what was meant by that is that academics usually have a great autonomy in what type of research they want to do, what questions they want to do research on, and what kind of methods they apply. So in that sense, I think that's very different from in a business setting where this is more hierarchically structured according to the goal of the venture or of the organization.
Great, thank you very much, Professor Rasmussen. I do have two other questions. One would be for Einar, and then one for you, Alicia. How would you like to proceed?
Go with Einar first, please.
Okay, sure. So this question comes from, I believe it's Dr. Blymel. His question is, are these related to dynamic capabilities to rearrange the more functional capabilities? And I'm trying to remember where he asked that question. Do you recall that that context, Professor Rasmussen?
Yeah, I think you can say it's linked to the dynamic capabilities perspective. So in the work I presented, we were more kind of trying to identify what capabilities the university needs in order to help these spin-offs, but obviously these capabilities may change, and that's what makes them dynamic. So yeah, it's definitely linked, and it could also be called dynamic capabilities, but it's sort of a way to characterize what is needed from the university side.
And I'd speak to that too, Ben, in that in the work that the entrepreneurial capabilities that I was speaking of, they're also linked to the dynamic capabilities literature. And you could think of the technology market matching capability as being a sensing capability from David Teese's work. And the other three, the claiming and protecting the invention, the choosing and mentoring the founding team, and the strategic timing as being shaping capabilities. Just to link to that literature.
Perfect, great. Thank you very much, Alicia and Einar. We do have about 3 minutes remaining before we proceed to the best awards and closing remarks. We do have a few more questions coming in. The next one was for Alicia. I'll ask this one now. To Alicia, you mentioned that the STAR scientists invited possible CEOs to be part of the MIT community. In what capacity?
So interestingly enough, a couple of the ventures that we observed, it was younger people who had been in a career maybe as a consultant or had done something else in pharmaceuticals, what have you, and had asked if they could help start a venture out of his lab. And he had recommended them to go to MIT Sloan School and take their MBA, and in the meantime observe and learn. And observe the lab as well. And so a couple of ventures were started through that process. In other ways, a lot of the other experienced serial entrepreneurs or experienced executives with pharmaceutical experience were connected to the STAR scientists through the venture capitalists that he had built very strong relationships with. And interestingly, several, 2 or 3 PhDs from his lab went on and became venture capitalists themselves, tightening those collections. So it ends up feeding back into what Einar's research shows about this network. And I wonder, Einar, if you could have a few closing comments about the network that's created in that university level capability, but the network between industry and academia, and how it can be helpful to universities.
Yeah. So when you were presenting, Alicia, I was thinking there is a lot in common in what we see in our different countries and the different research we have. And there is one thing that strikes me, and you mentioned that the small firms are the innovators and the large firms are usually not interested until it's kind of more proven technology. And actually, we looked at the university spin-offs in Norway, and what we see it's a surprisingly high share of them that are acquired by larger firms, and often at a very early stage, which means before they have a product on the market or before they have any revenues. And previous research has often seen these firms more like failures. Because if you look at larger data sets, it looks like these firms just disappears and they don't do any success. But they actually, the technology is taken further and commercialized by larger firms. And when we study these firms, we actually see that for many of the spin-offs, actually the only way for them to scale, or the best way for them to scale, is actually to be acquired by larger firms that have the capability, they have the production capacity and the sales abilities to actually scale the technology. So there is some kind of symbiosis going on there. We also see in the other end that often the university spin-offs are created out of a university industry collaboration. That has been previously, and an exciting technology has been developed, and it's too early stage for the industry to actually take it on board. But the spin-off is created and maybe later acquired. So I think this kind of dynamics is very important to know. And also there are several studies showing how the university actually benefit from this type of relationship, although many of the university spin-offs remain small or they disappear because they are acquired. So sometimes these portfolios doesn't look that impressive, but if you actually start looking what happened to these firms and what they actually do, it's much more. Some of them become like mini labs or mini research institutes that are much more applied. So often then it can be the customers of the spin-offs that actually take the great advantage by having access to the new technology and can commercialize it. So they are like an intermediary actor between the universities and larger companies. And if you see that in a, let's say, a regional ecosystem, they can be very very important. And we definitely need to study that more closely.
Wonderful. Well, I wonder, Einar, whether you would put in the chat box or some of the papers that you would say that would show that you know of that you could recommend to the delegates here that would show some of the benefits to universities of nurturing that, of firms that collaboration between large firms and small firms and the acquisitions and what you spoke about with the types of labs space that are available. That would be very interesting. But I do see that we're at our time. And so with that, I would like to thank everybody who has joined us and for your questions and your engagement today. This whole theme, of course, I'm finding very, very interesting. And I'd like to pass over to my co-chair, Dr. Sarah Lubick, who is going to tee us up for the themes of the day and the Best Paper Awards.
On with our day, and some of us go to bed. We have our Best Paper Awards and also the findings from our parallel sessions. So the RADMA team will be taking over to tell us who has won the Best Paper Awards for this symposium.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello again. This is Letizia. I'm with my colleagues, Professor Paavo Ritala from La Paranta University, Professor Ellen Henkel from University of Duisburg-Essen, Dr. Lawrence Dury from University of Cork, and myself. We've been part of the jury to take on this very, very tough decision. We had so many nice submissions this time. It was the hardest decision for us to actually select the Best Paper Awards of the symposium. So please, Chris, can you change the slide? Chris? Just to let you know that tonight we are talking about two different awards. One for the papers from the PhD session of the symposium. The jury for these papers have been constituted by a subset of us. So Ellen, Paavo, and Lawrence have been the judges for the Best PhD conference paper. And the publisher Wiley, that's the publisher of the R&D Management Journal, has kindly offered, as well as the honors that come from the award, a little in cash present of £150 for the winner. The second award we're gonna confer is the Best Conference Paper, taken from all the conference papers that we received. And the panel for that particular decision was made of Ellen, Lawrence, and myself. So next slide, please, Chris. Thank you. This is a little bit about the process of what we have done. As you know, we have different tracks and we ask the track chairs to select the best paper from their track, both eligible for the best conference paper and the PhD session. So the decision was done to shortlist 3 papers, and amongst these 3 papers, we have then decided the winner. Next, please. The criteria we used are probably unsurprising. We have obviously looked for a good paper in the sense that took all these characteristics. It had a particular relevance for the themes we are covering today and tomorrow. We wanted something new and very well grounded in theory. We wanted the soundness of the methodology, particularly from the empirical papers, and we were looking for how the paper was going to build the theoretical contribution that obviously has implications also in practice. So this is not unsurprising as a criteria. So now I am going to, well, already been unveiled. These are the shortlisted papers and authors of the best PhD paper. So I'll list them, and then Paavo will take over and comment on the various papers and announce the winner. So I remind you that the jury for this particular award, the jurors were Ellen, Paavo, and Lawrence. So the first paper we shortlisted was written by Andrew Park with Alicia Main and was selected from the entrepreneurship strategy track. The title is To Reveal or Not to Reveal, Open Innovation Mechanisms Within an Emerging Personalized Medicine Innovation Ecosystem. The second paper that was shortlisted came from the innovation policy track, and this has been authored by Meijuan Pan with Yuan Zhu and Guanang Zhu. And the title is Tie Strengths or Structural Configurations, the Network Effect of Innovation Diffusion of Emerging Technologies from Network Evolution Perspective. The third paper has been written by Valeria D'Amico, and it's extracted from the Innovation Intermediary lot, and Valeria wrote this with me. The title of this paper is The Emergent Process of Entrepreneurial Innovation at the Intersection Between Product Development and Venture Creation, Evidence from Fabrication Spaces. And now over to Paavo for the comments and the revelation of the best PhD paper.
Okay, thanks, Letitia. Okay, hi everybody on my behalf as well. I'm Paavo Ritala. I'm associate editor in R&D Management, and I'm from Finland. So it's very late evening here, and it's nice to end the evening by saying something positive about 3 different papers and then announcing one winner. I can give you a pre-warning. So you have your videos on, Andrew, Meijuan, and Valeria, all of you have your videos on. So when I announce the winner, you have the opportunity to say a couple of words about your paper. So you can now mentally prepare yourself to do this while I'm discussing the papers. So, well, the first paper was about the classic question in open innovation, to reveal or not to reveal, and how. And it was a quantitative study, and I liked it a lot. I liked all 3 papers. And this paper has 3 different mechanisms that relate to open innovation, and they were selective revealing, strategic timing, and strategic partnering. And there were different ways how to operationalize this. And the paper makes a nice contribution to open innovation literature. There's not too many papers putting these mechanisms all at one paper and doing a good job in showing how they work and so on. So this was a nice piece. Then the second paper was a very thorough, very technical paper that looked at a big network evolution in artificial intelligence, different patents, different types of networks. There was a lot of drawing of different networks. There was a lot of different determinants, antecedents for innovation diffusion between firms, and they were grouped to 2 categories: tie strength, which was operationalized in very many different ways, and then structural configuration. And then they were able to, the authors were able to then predict which of these antecedents explain innovation diffusion in a network. And it was a job well done also. And then last but not least, we had the paper about fabrication spaces. This was a qualitative paper. There was 2 quantitative ones. This was qualitative. All papers were empirical. And I really liked it. I like qualitative studies a lot myself. This had a lot of different fabrication spaces. They are sometimes called fab spaces or fab labs. And there were studies of how entrepreneurial innovation works. and there were two processes: the product development in itself, and then venture creation. So which one of these comes first, and what is the configuration of the path going forward in terms of creating the venture and product development? And the authors found qualitatively, they found different types of configurations, different patterns, like something like linear switch or quick market switch and so on. So I think this was very revelatory study in the sense that we now understand better how these kinds of processes unfold. Okay, so now I'm gonna stop the description of the papers, and I want to say that everybody here, every paper could deserve to be a winner, but we had to select one. It's a tough job, but eventually all of us concluded on the same paper, and that paper was the second paper by Meijuan Pan, tie strength or structural configurations. So we can give a big hand to Meijuan and the co-authors. And Meijuan, maybe
thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. You can say a couple of words about the paper.
Actually, the paper I have paid a lot of efforts on this paper, and I also received many people's help, especially from my advisor Joseph, and he teach me a lot of, and he tell me many advice, very useful for this paper, and my methodology also received some students and post fellows help on the such as the R language. So I really very thankful to them, and I also very thankful to the R&D Management Conference to give me the chance to have the to share my research and give me this honor. So thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. So congrats once more, and we'll hand it over to Letitia. We're gonna go for the next prize.
Okay.
Thank you, Paavo, and congratulations, Meijuan. Congratulations also for the prize that Wiley will send you. So don't forget to send your email address to the organizer so that Wiley can send you the voucher.
Okay, thank you.
Now
thank you
pass
very much.
Pleasure. Now we pass to the best conference papers, and this is the shortlisted papers here. I am one of the panelists together with Ellen Enkel and Lawrence Dooley, who will act as Paavo did earlier and comment on the papers and reveal the winner. So, and excuse me while I probably butcher some of the names and surnames in this session, but we have a lot of authors. So we use the same approach as in the previous award. We shortlisted a paper per track. So we have from the Innovation Intermediaries track, the paper written by Relinden Colin, René Belderbos, Stan Kelchermas, and Bart Layton, entitled "Many Are Called and Few Are Chosen: The Role of Science in Drug Development Decisions." The paper, which came from the Innovation Policy track, was authored by Jung-Mo Ahn and Tae-Jun Kim, and is entitled "Happily Ever After: The Longitudinal Impact of Government R&D Subsidy on Innovative Small Firms." Last but not least, from the entrepreneurship strategy track, we have a paper co-authored by Joshua Gans, Michael Kearney, Erin Al Scott, and Scott Stern, entitled "Choosing Technology: An Entrepreneurial Strategy Approach." All very interesting papers, I must say. And now I pass the microphone to Lawrence for an explanation of the decision.
Thank you very much, Letitia, and thanks to all the audience. It was a real pleasure in reviewing these three papers. They were of a significantly high quality, and it's great to see the quality of research that's going on, and as well to have the opportunity to learn and get insights into these areas. In relation to the three papers, if we begin with the paper Many Are Called, Few Are Chosen, this was by Relinden. It was a very interesting paper on biopharma firms, over 140 of them, where it examined the role of science, namely the divide between basic and applied research, and also looking in terms of the drug development. Is it the firms that develop it, or is there intermediaries that come into this space? It has the potential to make a hugely valuable contribution to how we think about the role of applied research in the drug development process and how we can more effectively manage the process to bring drugs faster from the lab bench to the bedside. And the authors are to be significantly complimented on their work. The second paper by Jun Mohan, Happily Ever After, a longitudinal impact of government R&D subsidies on small innovative firms, was a longitudinal study which looked at R&D subsidiaries in Korea. The paper calls into question the positive bias that we as researchers and policymakers take in relation to R&D subsidies and their impact on the firm. And the paper is complemented by how they take three different types of impact in terms of the research, not only the traditional inputs and outputs resource, but also looking at the behavioral impact of it. And this was a very novel presentation of their findings, and the authors are to complement it. The third paper was looking at choosing technology and entrepreneurial strategic approach. And this centered on bringing together the S-curves and entrepreneurial strategy. And the paper calls into question the idea of the S-curve as a driver, and instead looks at the decisions that the entrepreneur makes and the choices they have on the development of that S-curve and how that evolves. So again, this paper really gets us to think and question some of the assumptions that we have made up until now in relation to the S-curve and the entrepreneur being more than just finding the correct S-curve to base themselves in, that the S-curve is going to be impacted by the choices that they make and the explorative and exploitative mix of those choices. So to that end, while, as Pavel correctly identified in the last thing, all these papers are excellent, and I only wish I had written any of them myself, but that wasn't to be. So the winner of the best conference paper is the Choosing Technology and Entrepreneurial Strategy Approach by Gans, Carney, Scott, and Stern. So, Erin, are you there?
I am. Thank you. Thank you all very much. And thank you for organizing this wonderful session today to bring us all together. So thank you very much. And on behalf of my co-authors as well, thank you for recognizing this work.
It's a lovely piece of work, and you're to be complimented. And I look forward to seeing it with a DOI number and everything after a point.
Thank you.
Excellent. So I'm really proud of being part of the jury of these best conference paper. But now I think it's the time for us to pass the microphone back to Sarah for concluding. And just let me say, it has been a great pleasure. So back to you, Sarah, for concluding the day together with the colleagues that are running the tracks. So.
Thank you so much, Leticia. That was very exciting, and those are very cool papers. So on a day packed with inspiration, our session chairs and I will be sharing a short summary of key themes, surprises, and food for thought on what we've heard to get you primed for tomorrow, whether that means taking these learnings into your day, your evenings, or to your dreams. Dr. Ricardo Fini was supposed to be talking about firm strategy. Unfortunately, we knew we were going to have to do some adapting, and internet connections mean that Ricardo has had to send me his notes. So I will be giving his wrap up, and then Alberto Dominini will be, sorry, tripped over your name, long day. We'll discuss innovation intermediary stream, and then Dr. Joseph Sa will speak about our policy stream. So to start off with, on firm strategy, what Ricardo has left us with is many of today's best innovations started as a discovery in the lab. Firms that know how to turn a promising discovery into a viable product gain a tremendous competitive advantage. In particularly, entrepreneur spin-offs originating from universities form the majority of new entrants among many types of firms, including, for instance, biotechnology firms and companies operating in the US automobile and laser industries. Also, spin-offs often outperform other types of new ventures in terms of employment rates and company valuation. Yet, managing such a transition from lab to market is cumbersome and takes time because it requires collaboration between actors that differ substantially in many ways, which harks back to what we heard from Scott Stern earlier. In this regard, there are at least two themes that are salient and need some additional attention. First, how to manage the complex and bumpy, time-consuming process of moving from academic to commercial contexts. And then how to cope with issues that arrive when people engage in science commercialization, try to balance different goals among stakeholders. So these aspects are key, and some of them were addressed in today's presentations, and others we're hoping will be addressed tomorrow and by this community after the symposium.